Looking forward to diving into the book. Could you set the record straight as quickly as possible on Belichick and everything going on there? Because many thought he'd be the hot commodity, and this cycle has gone by, and he's not going to have a job.
Well, I think everybody's intimidated by his knowledge. Everybody wants to be collaborative. And when you have somebody with his knowledge, it's hard to create a collaborative situation because everybody's scared to death to go tell them what they think.
Yeah. Good stuff. Michael Lombardi, GM Shuffle on the podcast. He's got the new book, Football Done Right, setting the record straight on coaches, players, and history of the NFL. Give him a follow on Twitter at MLombardiNFL. Michael, we always appreciate the time out here in Portland. Congratulations on another book, and enjoy the game on Sunday.
Thank you.
All right, there we go. Michael Lombardi, author of the new book, Football Done Right, setting the record straight on the coaches, players, and history of the NFL. Swigard, we've got a Super Bowl.
Yeah. Are you getting hyped for it, or do you need? I mean, you're different because you got skin in this game. This is your team.
Yeah.
Thanks to Joey in here working on the YouTube.
On the
feed.
YouTubes, Joey. Hey, there we go. Joey hopping in early this morning. Look at him getting some coffee. That big bear over there. Growl. I'm feeling good. Super Bowl is here. Let's dive into it next on The Fan.
Big game coverage on 1080 The Fan is presented by Solo Stove.
McCoy at WarrenAllen.com.
On 1080 The Fan.
Well, when you have 4 guests on a show, it really feels turning and burning. It's like, hey, we're free. Nope, we got a guest coming up. And this is my mistake. I don't normally do 4 guests in a show. I see radio shows all across the country. They're like, hey, tomorrow's show. And they'll be like, full show. 2 hosts are in, 5 guests. And I'm like, when do you guys talk about anything?
When do you discuss?
Which is fine. Sometimes the guests are the information, and that's kind of all you need is your guiding light. I'd forgotten Michael Lombardi was Monday. I had mentally thought Tuesday. But we thanks again to Michael Lombardi.
He was great.
He is great. He was joining us live from the Delta Sky Miles Lounge for
That's
sure.
okay. He's a busy man.
He is.
He's probably on his way to Las Vegas.
I mean, he's a mover and shaker. He's been in the NFL forever. I didn't mean to make him hurt with the Raiders-Bucks game. But in all sincerity, Swigart, how often do we get this matchup? We all feel different ways in this game every year. I mean, largely, you get more consensus one way, and I think there are some Niner backers, but it's the favorite is the underdog, and the underdog is the favorite vibe. 83% of the bets, according to BetMGM, are on the Chiefs. 83. That is a staggering amount of percentage of bets being laid, and it's probably largely Chiefs' money line because for many, it boils down to this. Mahomes, Purdy. Now, I would add a caveat to it. As dumb as this may be to some, I would say Mahomes, Butker, Purdy, Moody. And if you're not paying attention to the kicker battle, you're overlooking the plot here. This could come down to a field goal.
Yeah, I think maybe the one reason people aren't looking at that as much is it's an indoor controlled environment.
That's okay. You think the Niners are feeling confident trotting that rookie out at 47 yards?
Butker short of Justin Turner from
Tucker, you mean?
Tucker from Baltimore is about as reliable as you're going to get in the NFL.
It absolutely is. And sometimes, as we've seen throughout the history of the game, that is what's going to decide it. I went through every Super Bowl yesterday. Not one. For any gamblers out there, quick note, don't do anything with the points. Don't take Kansas City plus 1.5. Don't take San Francisco minus 1.5. Maybe it's the first in history. No Super Bowl has been decided by 1 point. Not one. So just take the money line bet one way or the other.
There you go.
What for you is, what's your big thought thinking Super Bowl's here, it's Sunday, how you're viewing the matchup?
I'm wondering how San Francisco's going to go about crowding Kelsey. Can you force Patrick Mahomes to go to his second and third options? How reliable are they going to be? And then without sacrificing the running attack on Pacheco. And then on the other side, can the Chiefs, how similar to and I don't think they are similar, but I'm not into X's and O's. The biggest surprise in the AFC Championship game was how well the Chiefs shut down the Ravens running attack. Like they shut it down. Can they do that to Christian McCaffrey? Well, I think they go about it a lot. McCaffrey's trying to get to the edge. Baltimore is essentially trying to run between the tackles.
You know, the other thing about that, too, is, and it's not to discredit Kansas City. I'm with you. I thought they played really good defense throughout. Baltimore also abandoned it pretty quick. They only had 6 carries with their running backs, and that was their number 1 rushing team in football. I could be wrong here, but I don't have an opinion that Kyle Shanahan will only run Christian McCaffrey 6 times. You traded him for this. This is the moment you traded him for. And he stayed healthy these 2 seasons that he's been a Niner. He was awesome this year. I'm not going to overlook it. If I'm betting an MVP and I'm taking San Francisco because that's my team, you certainly wouldn't do this for taking Kansas City. Christian McCaffrey's the MVP. That's to me, that's the no-brainer. If they win this game, it's going to be because they consistently ran the football. I mentioned it there. Trent Williams is now in over Joe Staley, who was playing his last game of his career. Michael Lombardi, a guy with knowledge enough to be in the NFL for over 25 years, told you this boils down to the guards of San Francisco. Can they contain Chris Jones, who George Kittle referred to as Aaron Donald-ish, and can they establish some consistency in the running game? I know people want to boil this down to Purdy, Mahomes, and many people will choose whoever they choose to win the game based on that. I don't think that's the game necessarily. I also want to know, these two teams have switched profiles from 2019. David Lombardi, coincidentally same last name, wrote a really good piece in The Athletic where he highlighted in 19, the Niners were stout defensively, number 2 that year in DVOA, and about, not mid-tier, but a little better than mid, like a top 10 unit offensively. Kansas City, elite offense, okay defense. Well, now it's 2024, 2023, and they've switched profiles. San Francisco is the most explosive and balanced offense statistically in the National Football League. Kansas City, not so much. Defensively, it's the reverse. San Francisco, especially in these playoff games, has been kind of mid, and Kansas City has been stout. I don't know what any of that means for the matchup. I don't know if it is as simple as saying guy has Patrick Mahomes wins the game, but it certainly is interesting with the rematch of these two teams from 4 years ago, how they've basically switched identities. Does that matter and pay any dividends at all when they actually roll and play out the game?
Maybe a little bit, but I think the game plans are going to be somewhat similar. I still think San Francisco wants to control and possess the ball, own time of possession, just give Patrick Mahomes as few possessions as possible.
Lombardi mentioned that, didn't he, when he said Buffalo had 37 minutes. And largely when you get a team with time of possession, it's not often you see that they lose the game, and the Bills did.
Can't turn it over.
No, you can, and you got to make your kicks, even in the cold, windy weather. But I'm with you there. I think that's a very, not sneaky, but that's a really big point for San Francisco is, do they get McCaffrey going? Even if he's averaging 3, sub 4 yards a carry, you know what Kansas City did against Baltimore? They didn't abandon the run.
Well, you're still going to be Deebo Samuel's going to be involved in the running game in some capacity.
Certainly.
Mitchell will come in and give McCaffrey a little spell here and there so he stays fresh.
His over-under is 4.5 yards. I don't know if he will. Yeah, I couldn't believe that either.
Wow.
McCaffrey's is like 89, and I think Mitchell's is 4. Swag, I truly mean this, because I think you're hitting on exactly the right thing. If San Francisco is going to win, it's going to be because they controlled time of possession and ran the football. And they traded an awful lot to go get that dude.
Yeah.
He is, I think, in most people's minds in that locker room, their MVP.
And they got to put it in the end zone a few times.
You do. But I think overall, they're not going to be shying away from McCaffrey here. They're not pulling a Baltimore. Kansas City kept running with Pacheco. I think Pacheco had 15 carries in that AFC title game. He averaged sub 3.5 yards a carry. That's not efficient running, but you need it. You balance it out. San Francisco's in a similar light. We'll see what they do. Kyle with another chance. That 2019 season, by the way, was Spags' first year as D coordinator in Kansas City. Had a nice little game plan. Held San Francisco to 20 points for the whole game after a slow starting offense that got it going in the fourth quarter. I'm just curious to see what Kyle Shanahan learned from that Spags unit, what he's learning with the tape from what he's seen against Buffalo and Baltimore, and how he can apply that. And then on the other side, Kansas City. Are they going to get Kelsey free? Is Rashee Rice going to end up being like a sneaky MVP guy? What about Watson, the backup tight end? Valdez-Scantling's usually good for one deep pass a game. What do you do if that's taken out? The defense for San Francisco has already talked about how they need to gang tackle Pacheco because he's basically a bowling ball. One hit is not going to take him down. There are elements of this matchup that I think favor one side, but that be damned, because the other games that Kansas City's gone into, those matchups have existed, and when the game plays, none of it matters because they have 15. And 15 is that awesome. And that defense is that stout. So it's the Monday of the Super Bowl week. We'll have a lot on this throughout the week. We'll try to go to San Francisco. We'll try to go to Kansas City and get a feel for it. Let's pause the football conversation. It's also NBA trade deadline week. Your Portland Trailblazers are terrible. and many thought they would be moving some of these veteran pieces. Will they? Sean Eichen of the Rose Garden Report joins us for the Daily Ticker next. But first, Swag with a sports update.
This is a Super Week edition of Dirt and Sprague.
Brought to you by George McCoy at WarrenAllen.com.
Now, from the Spirit Mountain Casino Sports Desk, a Sports Center update on 1080 The Fan.
Brought to you by 808 Hawaiian Restaurant. Enjoy some Kahlua Pig Terry Chicken, even an island cocktail at Burnside Woodstock, or order online at ate-oh-ate.com. First on The Fan. Trailblazers were shorthanded once again in Denver Sunday night. They gave rookie Chris Murray his first career start, led by as many as 14 in the first half, but they got overwhelmed in the second half. Nikola Jokic, 29 points, 8 boards, 7 assists, leading the Nugs to a 112-103 win. Blazers come home and start a 7-game homestand Thursday against the Pistons. Chiefs and 49ers arriving in Las Vegas Sunday, starting their final preparations for Super Bowl 58. However, for Patrick Mahomes, a little distraction. His father, Pat Sr., arrested for suspicion of driving while intoxicated in Tyler, Texas over the weekend. The Washington Commanders trying to fill up their coaching staff quickly. For new head coach Dan Quinn, reports are Cliff Kingsbury will be the new offensive coordinator. Joe Witt Jr. will come over, also from Dallas, and serve as defensive coordinator. Severe wind and rain hit the Monterey Coast in California. That forced the PGA Tour to shorten the AT&T Pebble Beach National Pro-Am to 54 holes. U.S. Open champion, former Oregon Duck Wyndham Clark, declared the winner after shooting a course record 60 on Saturday. More sports scores and stories in 30 minutes. Jason Swigart from the Spirit Mountain Casino Sports Desk. The Pro Football Playoffs are here. Watch and wager on every game at Spirit Mountain Casino. Visit spiritmountain.com.
The inside story on the Blazers, Ducks, and Beavers. Danny
George McCoy at WarrenAllen.com.
On 1080 The Fan. In this wide world of sports, some stories can slip through the cracks.
Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules.
This is the Daily Ticker, where Dirt and Sprague visit the insiders that are covering the stories you've heard about, and some you haven't.
How'd you do that? Actually, I'm not even mad. It's amazing.
The Daily Ticker with Dirt and Sprague on 1080 The Fan.
All right, Daily Ticker time. It's NBA trade deadline week. Yes, the drama that all the national pundits love to talk about year-round. Why talk about great stories like Minnesota and Oklahoma City when every podcast can be about how the New York Knicks or the Lakers are going to make the big trade to maybe give themselves the best shot to get past the teams that nobody wants to talk about? Sean Highkin, our good friend, a great friend of the show, covering the Portland Trailblazers. Rose Garden Report is where you can find his work on Twitter, at Highkin. Give him a follow on the social medias. Good morning, Sean. Thanks for hopping on with us. Are you as excited about all the national podcasts telling you how the Lakers are going to get better this week?
I haven't realized that's what they're talking about. I thought the new thing was LeBron was going to go to the Knicks because he put a towel over his head after the game that they played the other day.
Yeah. Well, why talk about Anthony Edwards being awesome when we could talk about a towel that was on LeBron's shoulder? I mean, come on, Sean. What are we doing here? We covering the league or are we covering the league? Trade deadline week, I think with this group of Blazers, they're 15-35. Close games, fought hard, played, I thought, pretty well at Denver, but they lose both games. They'll come back home for a while here, but the trade deadline is this week. Everybody, Sean, thought this roster, you looked at the veteran guys that you got in the Dame trade, the post-Dame trade stuff, and thought, okay, there's a piece to move pieces. The intel or the noise, at least, is that not so big a rush to move Brogdon, not looking to move Jeremy Grant. Is that where it all kind of stands today as we go in this week?
It's a little bit early to say definitively what they are and aren't going to do. I think a lot of stuff is going to either unfold or not in the next few days. I definitely think Jeremy Grant is not. Like if I had to guess, I mean, obviously nothing is a 100% chance of happening, but I think Jeremy Grant is definitely very, very close to definitely not going to be moved. That's where I would have that. The Brogdon thing is a little bit more interesting because, yeah, like you said, pretty much all season everybody has kind of assumed that that's the move that they're going to make before the deadline, but they're really just, from what I've heard, there just really hasn't been much movement on anything, and I don't think they're operating, the Blazers front office is operating from a position of we have to move him before the deadline. If they don't get an offer that they like, they might just wait until the summer.
Do you think the draft narrative of the 2024 draft has maybe had to done some recalculation within the front office because most people are panning the draft and it appears they already have 2 picks in the first round?
I mean, I do think it decreases the urgency of teams to just stack up draft capital because, yeah, like you said, they're going to have their own pick. They're probably going to, unless it jumps into the top 4 in the lottery, they're going to have Golden State's pick also. And so, 3 picks in a draft that most people think is not the greatest. Like if you wait until the summer, and teams are offering a first-round pick, you can get a first-round pick in next year's draft, which people think is going to, even outside of the Cooper Flag thing where he's going to be the number 1 pick, I think there are other people in that draft that folks think is going to be, and again, this is way too early for this stuff as far as projecting the draft, but
right.
I do think that they don't view it as this huge sense of urgency that, they need to get more picks in this upcoming draft.
Sean Highkin's our guest here, covers the Trailblazers, does an exceptional job on Twitter, at Highkin. Find him on Instagram as well, and his great work at rosegardenreport.com. I highly advise anybody looking for good coverage. Subscribe to it. Sean is there day in and day out, every practice. He's there with Meringue at the earliest appearances of any media member for every home game. He does a good job on Twitter, at Highkin. The Chauncey Billups discourse has been really interesting this year. Some people not liking him as a hire in general. And now we had gone 2 years without knowing if he's good. Here's year 3. It starts out poorly. They lose by 62. And I'd say as of late, it feels like the last few games here now, they've put together some competitive basketball where they're fighting and playing pretty hard against better teams, better rosters. What do you make of Chauncey Billups so far?
If you had asked me that question 3 weeks ago after they had gotten back from that early January road trip where they got blown out in 6 out of the 7 games, I would have told you that was the first time I was seriously thinking about whether I was going to be covering a coaching search in April and May. But since then, I honestly think that they've kind of stabilized and they've gotten back to kind of how they were playing at the beginning of the season. And now I think there's been enough growth there and enough, progress. Like, it could have gone completely off the rails after that road trip, but it didn't. So I think at this point, I would lean towards there not being any sort of change being made there.
Are you noticing any, like when you watch them, I know we're not the heaviest of X's and O's guys, but like when you watch them, what have you seen differently that maybe suggests that this, not turnaround, but more of a buy-in and, playing their tails off and coming close to beating teams like Denver? Is there something you're noticing when you see them play the last couple weeks?
Well, the ball movement is kind of the obvious thing. After that road trip, I was looking up some of those tracking stats that the NBA puts out, and they were, I think, 5th worst in the league in terms of number of passes thrown per game. When they had talked at the beginning of the season about wanting to be a team that moves the ball a lot, that was obviously a goal that they were not reaching. But since then, I don't have the numbers right in front of me right now, but I think they've been top 10 in that category since then. So that's something I think they made a conscious effort to address, and it's and it's at least so far it seems to be working, at least in the sense of they're competitive in some more of these games. They had the win against Milwaukee, and then they had that road trip where they almost won the game in Oklahoma City, except for the weird stuff with the timeout. And then the next night they beat Houston in overtime. And then they just had these 2 games back-to-back in Denver where they lost both of them. But, going up against the defending champions, and they I think held their own, and it was a respectable showing in both cases. So I think some things have started to turn around. I'll be interested to see how the rest of the season goes, especially once maybe we get into March and April and some of the younger guys start getting more playing time. And so we'll see how some of that goes. But for right now, I think people are kind of happy with where things sit, people in the organization.
How do you feel about Scoot so far? He had a pretty big game in that first matchup against Denver. He had 30 points, a career high. Not so much the case in the second game, though. I thought he kind of turned it around a little bit after a bit of a slow start. What have you made of Scoot so far in the development he has shown throughout the year? Panned a lot by some people. A random Real GM article saying, it's nobody's going to want to draft a guard that's sub whatever again. And, it's not a referendum on his entire career. Obviously, he's 19 years old. But what have you made of Scoot so far?
You're starting to see a little bit of growth. You're starting to see him stack up some good games. And I actually was pretty encouraged, even though he didn't shoot well. I thought pretty much everything else last night in the second Denver game, I think he played pretty well overall. It's just, he wasn't making shots, and I think that's going to happen with a rookie. I'm reflexively saying, this 19-year-old kid, but he's actually 20 now. He turned 20 on the off day between the 2 games, so you can't even call him a teenage point guard anymore. Okay. But no, I think you're, it's been pretty rough. It's been pretty up and down, but I think over the last couple of weeks you're seeing enough consistent growth and stringing some good games together that I think I know that the organization is happy with where things sit, and they kind of knew going in that it was going to be a little bit of a roller coaster ride drafting someone that young playing that position, that it was going to be a little bit of a uneven path in the first year, but I think people are happy with where things sit.
I'll get you out of here on this one, Sean. What do you got cooking at the Rose Garden Report?
Ask me again on Friday once I get through the trade deadline. The good news about the way that the schedule sits this year is that they had the game in Denver last night. They don't play again until Thursday against Detroit. So they don't play anymore until after the trade deadline. So there's not going to be any situations where, last year they were playing against Golden State and Josh Hart gets pulled off the floor 5 minutes before the game because they agreed to the trade with the Knicks and they had to take him out of the starting lineup, and everybody on the team found out while they were in layup lines. Like, I've never seen that before. But so after the trade deadline, I think it should be. I've got some kind of ideas for stuff I want to do for the rest of the season, but I got to kind of figure that out after the deadline. It's just it was like get through the Dame game and then get through the deadline, and then we'll figure that out.
All right, there we go. Give him a follow on Twitter at Heiken. You can find his coverage at the rosegardenreport.com, rosegardenreport.com. A great membership. I'm a happy member of the website, so I appreciate the content, Sean. We look forward to everything that's going to happen this week. Trade deadline at the end of the week. And going forward from there. Thanks for hopping on with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Good to talk to you, Brandon.
All right, there we go. Good stuff from our buddy Sean Heiken covering the Trailblazers. Trade deadline week is here. And how noisy will it get in Portland? That's next on The Fan.
Who's stinking it up?
Woo! Do not go in there.
It's time for Who's Stinking It Up, a sports lowlight that's ripped from the headlines.
We couldn't do diddly poo.
Brought to you by Three Mountains Plumbing. Schedule your appointment online at threemountainsplumbing.com.
And leaking out. The Bucks got caught. And Keontae George makes them pay.
There's Lisa Byington, Bally Sports, Milwaukee. The Bucks up double digits on the Jazz going into the fourth quarter. They lose by 15.
They were up 19, I think. They got outscored by 27 in the fourth quarter.
Just when they come back from 25 against Dallas and you think they got it figured out, they go to Utah and they have that happen to them. Doc is now 1-3. Who's stinking it up? So far, that hire of Doc Rivers for the Bucks. Brought to you by Three Mountains Plumbing. Make plumbing and electrical services delightful. Get your time back. Let the pros tackle those projects you need completed. Schedule an appointment online. Three Mountains Plumbing. That's threemountainsplumbing.com. Hey, everybody, Sprague here.
to you by George McCoy at WarrenAllen.com.
On 1080 The Fan. It's crunch time. Let's go! Where Dirt and Sprague crunch the hot topics you want to hear.
What's the pressure? Don't sit here and act like there's no... We get nervous teeing off in front of a gallery on the 10th hole at Eastmoreland.
Crunch time, brought to you by Crunch Fitness. With memberships as low as $9.99 per month. Find your crunch time in Portland, Vancouver, and online at crunch.com.
All right, welcome back in. Somebody said they think Hyken just told me that's proprietary, Sprague, when I asked what was coming up at Rose Garden Report. Trade deadline week. It's the week that most people only pay attention to the NBA during the regular season. And a week that may involve our Blazers here, Swigard.
Maybe.
It's a real stink around this team, and I'm tired of it.
I don't know when to really start honing in and paying attention. At what point do Joe Cronin and Chauncey Billups say, okay, this is our group? I'm waiting for that. I don't feel like they're there yet.
Well, I'm wondering if they're there next year. Do you think they'll be there next year? Because I'm still not sure they will be.
I don't know. I'm just wake me up when you say, okay, here we go. This is the group. This is.
Well, I was texting with a buddy yesterday that works in the media, and we were talking about this team, and we kind of talked about Ant a little bit.
He doesn't fit.
He doesn't. Well, certainly you draft a point guard that is going to be the guy that needs the ball. The guy that currently with the ball is not going to have the ball anymore.
Well, the ball sticks. When he gets it, it's a lot of one-on-one. He holds it. At least with Scoot, he's trying to move it.
Yeah, I feel like Scoot is get people involved guy.
Yes.
Because, yes, he cannot shoot at the levels of Anthony Simons. But this is when he pops, it feels a little different than when Ant is popping, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Well, that's because a lot of it is Scoot is going to the rim and crashing, and a lot of times he'll get hot from outside. He will go and finish, and
I've been a little underwhelmed with Ant this year. I got to be honest with you. I know he's been sick and whatnot, but I've been a little underwhelmed with him.
And it's fine when Shaden's not available, but when Shaden comes back, don't you want to see, okay, how does Scoot and Shaden work?
Yeah, what they would tell you, though, I mean, this is kind of their stance. This isn't me giving an opinion.
I know.
The stance seems to be, well, you think it's bad now. You wait until it's just rookies out there. And I think a lot of people are like, yeah, we know it'll be bad.
We understand that.
Don't we kind of need to see it?
I think if you're asking for complete and utter buy-in, I think you know, nobody thinks Brogdon's going to be here very long. People are like, is Jeremy Grant still going to be here? Okay. We'll see if they do something significant. I don't think so.
The other thing Scoot does that Ant doesn't, he gets to the free throw line.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he's got it going, he gets to the line. You know, he had 12 this is a random stat. He had 12 free throw attempts. This was post the first Denver game.
That's a lot of free throws in an NBA game, especially for a rookie.
You might be asking, well, how much is that for context? That's more than DeAndre Ayton attempted combined in his previous 9 games. Just like as a reference point, your big man doesn't get to the line. Ant doesn't get to the line. Like that's not the most important stat, but it's underrated how important it is to get those points from the free throw line. I hear you. I think they're going to trade Brogdon. I think a team will be desperate. I think in Orlando, it certainly doesn't feel like they're going to do business with Miami, but Miami would make sense for a Brogdon. There are teams out there that I think may get desperate enough. Now, what's the asset? Young player and maybe a 25 pick is the best hope, right? For Malcolm Brogdon, I can't imagine you're getting much more than that. I like Brogdon, but he's Malcolm Brogdon.
Just depends. And I haven't paid that much attention, so I don't know what the market is
That's okay. It seems like that's everybody.
I don't know if there's, teams, the only team I know that's a little bit more desperate maybe than they would have been would be Philly based on Embiid. And that only matters if they're trying to stay in a top 4 seed.
Yeah, if they were looking to kind of tread water, get
Embiid's going to
Embiid
be
back.
out maybe a month or so.
Well, torn meniscus procedure seems like a lot longer. But I guess
I don't know.
We'll have to wait and see. They didn't want to announce year over because for obvious reasons. But, yeah, maybe it's Philly. Maybe Philly gets desperate here. They also could be just keeping everybody. And Sean alluded to at the end there, like this idea the young guys will get minutes more. It's like, so you're already telling me, and not that we know they're not tanking, but so at some point you're just going to – injuries will start popping up for all the vets?
Yeah. And I don't want them to make a deal just to make a deal.
No,
obviously.
No, I don't think that's the position they hold. Swag, they got Brogdon not to do that. They got Brogdon for legitimate value pieces.
Yep.
So will they move him? I'm going to put the eggs in yes, that somebody will come through and be a little desperate and offer you something that you want to say yes to. But he's got another year into the deal. And right now, the tea leaves indicate Grant certainly staying and Brogdon staying. And so it's left with us to continue to watch this team. They have been more competitive. They've fought more and stayed in some of these games. Still not winning them. And we play the games to win the games, according to Herm Edwards. So we'll see what they do. Deadline is on Thursday. Anything breaks between now and then, obviously we're going to talk about it. But the Blazers with their back-to-backs against Denver, and now they come home and they wait till Thursday to play their next game. We got a loaded final hour to get to. I got some NFL odds and ends to kick off the final hour with. Tyson Aldridge going to join us at 8:15. Loaded final hour, Dirt and Sprague on YouTube, Odyssey app, and 1080 The Fan.
This is Rick Jones of Goldberg.
us on the sports betting landscape. Listen on Odyssey or wherever you get your podcasts. This is a week for quality food and beverages.
I don't like beans in my chili.
That's a fair debate because the original chili did not have beans in it.
What do you mean you were there when they created the original chili on the Old West?
Yep.
Expensive commercials and stupid questions from reporters covering their first sporting event.
Is your mom picking you up after the Super Bowl?
This is a Super Week edition of Dirt and Sprague.
Brought to you by George McCoy at WarrenAllen.com. Injured? Don't trust just anyone to something so personal. Call George McCoy at Warren Allen. Online at WarrenAllen.com.
Dirt and Sprague on 1080.
I'm here so I won't get fined.
The Fan.
All right, welcome back in. The final hour of the radio program on a Monday morning. It's been a busy one. It has. Jesse Simonton of On3.com had the Chip Kelly news that Chip Kelly and UCLA hate each other, but they're in a loveless marriage that they can't get out of. Unless the Seattle Seahawks come calling with old Mike McDonald and pick Chip Kelly as the OC, it appears it is going to be the ugliest, loveless sex of your life next season, Bruin fans.
Isn't that what Los Angeles is famous for?
Largely, yeah. Being numb to everything. So we talked with him at 6:30 and the state of college football in general. At 7, we have Michael Lombardi, former NFL GM. He's got a new book out, Football Done Right. He joined us live from the Delta Airlines Sky Miles Lounge. I'm sure he had a great little brunch situation in front of him, maybe a little drinkski, huh?
I think he was having a mimosa.
I hope he was.
Is he a mimosa or a Bloody Mary guy?
Lombardi strikes me as mimosa.
Okay.
I think he'd complain about the messiness of a Bloody Mary. And then you spill it, and then you got that red dot.
What's the celery for?
Why is all this food on? I got a cheeseburger on my drink. What's going on here? I don't like it. Too much business, too much noise. 7:30, we talked with Sean Highkin of Rose Garden Report. It is NBA trade deadline week, so a little peek ahead. And Tyson Alger will join us coming up here at 8:15. If you miss any of the hours of the radio program, you can always catch it at 1080thefan.com under our podcast section. And you can reach the show at the Vancouver Ford text line, 503-864-6326. They treat you right before, during, and after the sale. Visit them for more information at vancouverford.com. And just a reminder, that coming up here just a couple weeks, you can hang out and play golf indoors. Don't worry about that rain, that cold weather. We have the 1080 The Fan Winter Golf Classic out at X Golf Tualatin and Vancouver Tuesday, February 27th. It is a threesome, not a foursome, a threesome. 4 makes it weird. And you can choose from either the noon round or the 4 p.m. round at either location. We'll have Danny and Dusty live from Vancouver. Isaac and Suk will be live from Tualatin. The winning threesome will win a free foursome at this summer's 10th annual Fan Golf Classic. The last place threesome will get a free lesson at X Golf. So go to 1080thefan.com if you're interested and register your team. There you go. Let's start the final hour. I caught this on Friday, and I thought it was hilarious. Did you? I guess I missed this. Colin Cowherd sent a entire sports city into a panic. He had some intel on Caleb on his show. They picked it up. They repurposed it. They brought it back the next day, and then they got Colin on their drive time show in the afternoon. He just went on for 25 minutes. I listened to the whole thing. It was actually really good. Like, if you're a Chicago Bears fan, it was fascinating, the read that is on Caleb Williams going into the draft, because you remember a few months ago, there was that random story that Caleb wants things differently than any other quarterback. He wants, like, capital in the ownership and all that.
Yeah, there was something. And we couldn't figure out if that was just his dad spouting off.
It was his dad.
Yeah.
That's what it sounded like, not Caleb.
Yeah.
Then Colin referenced that maybe Chicago isn't the place Caleb wants to be. And so, he's a D.C. kid. The D.C. Commanders just hired Cliff Kingsbury,
right,
who left the Vegas job because of, quote, negotiations to go be the OC for Dan Quinn in Washington, D.C., that maybe he'd pull an Elway or an Eli. Colin went on Chicago's station and said that's not true. But, man, the ability to say one thing, offhanded comment, to send an entire sports city examining an audio clip. What did he mean? What does this mean? Does this mean what I think it means? Or does it mean something I don't think it means? interesting how nervous and ready Chicago kind of is for this pick with Caleb Williams looming. Will DC make this massive can't say no to it trade? Or is Chicago so entrenched in take him Caleb 1 that nothing will matter?
Well, I'm curious. I think Chicago, the more quiet they are, the less that comes out, the more mystery that surrounds. Are they going to roll with Justin Fields, trade the pick? I think it plays into their benefit.
Well, their coach should too as well, right? Eberflus, he's not an offensive guy, and he had a bad year.
So, but I'm just thinking from the GM standpoint and the team standpoint, they are probably all tightened up. No, they cannot have any leaks whatsoever, because if they do decide to trade the pick, anything that leaks out diminishes the value. Like if people don't know that you get up that Thursday morning and where are they this year? Cleveland?
I don't know where the draft is.
I forget where they're going this year. But if nobody's 100% certain, are they keeping it? If they keep it, are they taking Williams? Are they taking a non-quarterback? Are they going to trade it? You might get an absurd deal.
It's in Detroit.
Well, that's right. It's in Detroit. You could get an absurd offer, quite possibly, if another team panics.
So Colin did add on the Chicago hit that they're going to get multiple, like 4 firsts, 5 firsts type offers for them. He could be amazing, but like that's also a giant haul. 4 to 5 firsts.
I think the Bears need so much more help at so many other positions that you have a guy that is serviceable, that can, if you put some things around him, like most teams.
So are you talking about Fields here? You're saying you flip the pick, you get the assets.
I'm like, if you get an absurd enough offer that maybe you get a player now and 3 or 4 first, and a bunch of picks, and you're like, all right, there's, I haven't looked at how deep the draft is. I know it's deep at wide receiver. So you can definitely get one of those, maybe
but
2.
But Steve, a quarterback, receiver, linemen seem to be pretty decent. Everything else is kind of up in the air.
So if you get a haul of picks and you can load yourself up with young talent, is Fields good enough with all sorts of elevated talent around him to take you where you want to go?
Let me flip it on you then, okay? Because
you certainly can.
Yeah, absolutely. But let me flip this now. Same scenario, everything you threw out. You get the 4 to 5 first, right? And you say, well, Caleb's good. This is amazing, and maybe we use this to benefit Justin Fields. They have DJ Moore. Their other pick in many mocks has Rome Odunze. Mm-hmm. Like you could have... And by the way, that was a hot take you dropped the other day before you dipped for Stockton, and listeners noted it. You saying Rome Odunze is going to be the best receiver, the number 1 receiver from day one in Chicago. I don't necessarily agree with that opinion, but I think he certainly can work his way to that. But the DJ and Odunze are awesome. Is Justin good enough? And if Justin isn't good enough, isn't that going to cost him the head coaching job? Isn't Eberflus going to get fired? Okay, well, now you've got a fired coach.
Is it his call or is it the GM's call?
Well, but that's the point. Ryan Poles is the general manager. If he decides to take the trade and then use those picks and keep Justin, and it goes wrong, you're going to have to fire the coach. So now you're overturning your staff. And then what's Kevin Warren of the Bears going to think of Ryan Poles if that fails? He's going to have to maybe reevaluate it. Chicago's not going to end up being any good if that happens. And now here you are in Chicago. You got these picks, but you've shown no consistency. None. I was blown away to learn the Bears have 1 winning season in 11 years. 1. Like, you have to try to be that bad. That's terrible.
Yes.
And they were able to accomplish that feat. I don't know why they didn't fire Eberflus. I would have much preferred an offensive guy. I think that goes without saying, especially in a draft where you may be drafting a quarterback. You think DC hired Cliff Kingsbury because of his offense or because of his offense and ties to Caleb? That I'm wondering. I think a lot of people are concluding because he's a DC kid.
The ties to Caleb don't hurt, but if that's the only reason they're making the hire, then that's pretty scary.
His offense in Arizona was very meh. He averaged 23 points a game. It's not like he's got the most exciting offense. They're doing things differently in DC too, Swag. There was a report that Ben Johnson didn't interview well with the DC Commanders, and he really, like, to save face, said, I'm coming back. I unfinished business, but he didn't interview well. Well, his side of the camp got word out and said, they're basketball people, and they don't know what the hell they're doing. Because Josh Harris is now the owner of that franchise. They've brought in Bob Myers as like a consultant for team building, even though he only has, NBA experience. So you got a both sides thing. This organization doesn't know what they're doing. Well, this coach didn't interview well. The whole draft, man, it's a couple months away, but it's also so busy and loud right now. Did Kingsbury get hired because they're going to make this all-in deal to go get Caleb at 1? Certainly reasonable to conclude that. Chicago, are they going to move Justin Fields? Say no to the sweetheart deal of maybe 5 first-round picks and keep that guy, or maybe take the trade and move out of 1 and not take K. I don't know. I have no idea where it's going, but man, is it loud and interesting at the top end of this draft. Jaden Daniels, is he the second quarterback? Is he better than Drake May? How'd you feel about Drake May this year? Did he impress you? Like, so many ways that this is going to go in this draft. And we just have to, as Samuel L. Jackson said, hold on to our butts, because it is ever evolving in that those top 3 picks area of the NFL draft. Tyson Alger, I-5 Corridor. He joins us next. Hodgepodge segment with Tyson Alger on The Fan.
Chase, make more of what's yours.
Chase mobile app is available for select mobile devices. Message and data rates may apply. JP Morgan Chase Bank, N.A. member FDIC.
Someone told me long ago.
This is a Super Week edition of Dirt and Sprague.
Brought to you by George McCoy at WarrenAllen.com.
On 1080 The Fan.
Well, falling for the Big Ten is not going to be the easiest thing for lifelong Pacific Northwest sports fans, but it must be done. And the man who wrote about that at his website, i5corridor.com, along with many other great articles that you can find, is our good friend Tyson Alger on Twitter, at Tyson Alger. And he joins us now, the creator, editor, lead writer, i5corridor.com. Good morning, Tyson. Nice to have you back on the radio program. What have you made of the 2024 recruiting cycle? You may not be the biggest recruiting guy, but Oregon being number 3 certainly is something we're not used to seeing. They've been good. Being number 3 behind Bama and Georgia is kind of a next level moment for them, is it not? Do we have him there, or Swag? Or you not there? Or hello? Am I all alone here? You got anybody? Yeah?
Hello?
Hello? We weren't turning you up for some reason. Did you hear my question? That was the weirdest start to an interview I've ever had in my life.
I did hear the question, and let me tell you what, my answer was eloquent, and I don't know if I can quite repeat it.
You know what? It's okay, Tyson. I didn't hear anything, and then I look up, and Swag is not in the room. I'm not sure if we're even back yet. I was very confused. I'm sorry about that. What was your answer to what Dan Lanning is doing right now in recruiting?
Yeah, it was one thing when Mario Cristobal was in Eugene and the Ducks started to kind of consistently establish like those top 10 classes, but it was always kind of peaking around that 6-ish position. And so you kind of wondered what Oregon would become when you infused kind of the Big Ten stability behind it. And I mean, I knew this was kind of what Dan Lanning was good at, and this is the type of staff he assembled, and they have a very progressive NIL collective going as well. But for them to be right behind Alabama, number 3 in the country is quite something. And, I go back to Dan Lanning's introductory press conference where he was like, you know what, we are going to win every recruiting battle in the state of Idaho. And then that's where they pulled the 5-star kid from this weekend, which is just kind of a funny example of the battles they're winning because that was a Gatlin Bear. He was down to Oregon and Michigan, and he picks Oregon, and it's just another kind of rich for the Ducks to have going into the next era here.
Yeah, it's a great name for a recruiting standpoint to have a Gatlin Bear in your recruiting class. But I want to ask you, this isn't to suggest the power play or the power dynamics in Eugene, but when the Pac-12 was crumbling, I mean, we were live on the air in the middle of all of it. Like, it looks like they're going to agree to this. And then like an hour later, nope, they're all bailing. They're going to the Big Ten. The conference is dead. How pivotal or important, not that Mullins doesn't have the experience for it or anybody running the athletic department or university itself, how pivotal was Dan Lanning's voice, you think, is saying, no, we got to go to that conference. This one now, as it currently exists, does not make sense for us. We have to go. How pivotal do you think Lanning's voice was in some of those conversations?
Oh, I think it certainly helped. I mean, he's the one that's having to compete and compare himself against the teams in those other conferences. Nothing against Oregon State, but I just think the battles that the Ducks were in were just a little bit different. And so I think, having to go out recruiting and defend what the Pac-12's position was against everything Ohio State had going for it, against everything Alabama had going for it, against all the teams that Oregon's going to be judged against. I'm sure Dan Lanning was 100% champion. Let's get to the Big Ten. Like let's be on the same equal playing field. I think that's the big thing for the Ducks is they believe that if they're on an equal playing field that they can compete or beat anybody. And right now, since that ascension to the Big Ten, we're kind of seeing that on the recruiting trail. Like it's insane that they're number 1 in the Big Ten in recruiting right now, especially when you kind of we'll look at the history of how Oregon's recruited. I know it's been, the main thing since Cristobal took over, but this is like a 7-year transformation into absolute national recruiting power that the Ducks have done, and now they're competing and beating the teams on the biggest stage for it.
Tyson Alger's our guest here. i5corridor.com, i-5corridor.com is where you can find his website. He's on Twitter at Tyson Alger. Yeah, I talked with a guy from On3 earlier this morning, Jesse Simonton. He had the story on Chip Kelly and UCLA basically being in a loveless, sexless marriage that's just they're forcing themselves to stay in. And I think anybody that's been in that situation in real life realizes how miserable that is. And so UCLA is in a really down spot. Many people wondering about Lincoln Riley. We don't know what the Pac-2's future is now that the SEC and Big Ten are merging. What is Tyson Alger, a guy who has been covering college football for quite a long time and now running his own website, what do you make of the conference realignment as it's all unfolded the last 7 to 8 months?
Well, you know how I said I was pretty eloquent earlier? My answer for this one is it still just sucks, man. This week we started kind of promoting positive stories about why you should be looking forward to the Big Ten, because obviously it's a new future for Oregon, and I think there are some absolute great things for the Ducks to look forward to. But as a whole in college sports, I mean, I still don't enjoy this. I don't think this is great for the longevity of the game. I think it's going to be really good for the teams that are really rich, and I think that list is going to continue to narrow down until, I mean, every time it seems like it gets stable, it just seems like it unstabilizes, and then it thins down, and the money just keeps going to the top. And there's a lot of fake empathy, and we feel sorry for this school and this school and this school, and we're going to miss this rivalry and that rivalry. But then they keep destroying them. And so, as somebody whose website really kind of focuses on the storytelling and history and kind of the people aspect of sports, I still don't like this. I still think there's going to be some great stories to tell, and that doesn't mean the futures of either of these programs are done or there's no more stories there, but it just sucks. It sucks, man. It sucks.
Yeah. No. I think that's well put. I think a lot of people feel that same thing. If you and me if we can piece together $253 million, you and I could buy the athletic department. That's a possibility, right?
I think if you and I could piece together $200 and $300 million, let's just buy Hawaii or an island or something and get out of this industry.
That might not be a bad idea, actually, relaxing on a beach. We'll be Andy Dufresne and Red. That'll be us. We'll just be salvaging boats and living in Mexico, enjoying tacos and margaritas. You're also doing an exceptional job covering hoops. Oregon State does the prototypical Oregon State hoops thing. They win 2 big games and rah, they're back. And then they go to UCLA, they hang, but they lose. And then they get their asses handed to them by USC, who at that point was the worst team record-wise in the conference. I think Beaver fan is moving past the season. I think the season's done for them. I think it's baseball season in Corvallis. What do you make of Oregon? Kind of an interesting team. I think they're good, but then they lose that game to UCLA. I know they got delayed by a Biden motorcade here, but what do you make of Oregon? They're still near the top of the conference, but the conference also feels very mediocre.
Yeah, it's a weird Oregon season because I feel like there was a fair amount of goodwill in the non-conference when they had all those injuries again, but then they were winning, especially games that they probably would have had excuses to lose. And I think there's just been such a down in basketball in Eugene for the last few years that everyone's kind of wanting to give Altman the benefit of the doubt just to see if there's any magic left there. But they got most of their roster healthy now, at least, they have N'Faly Dante back. They have Nate Biddle back. And it really seems like it's kind of, I don't know if that's just having 2 7-footers back has completely changed their flow, but it's just been very inconsistent basketball the last couple of weeks. And, losing to that UCLA team, that's a tricky one because Paulie's a tough place to play. There was the Biden motorcade thing. There's the fact that it's still UCLA and there's talent there, but that's a loss that's really hurtful to them for, an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament. So, you're kind of looking at this thing. There's a month left to play. Altman's going to have to pull off one of his kind of Altman magic runs to make the tournament here, whether it's winning kind of out in the regular season or putting together a run in the tournament. And just with the consistency that they've shown, I don't know if that's likely. And if that's the case, you're kind of staring down 3 straight seasons of NCAA tournament misses. That's coupled with the struggles of the women's team. Like it feels like this is kind of make or break time for him, because especially as you're moving into the Big Ten, like Altman's 64, I think. Mm-hmm. It's just, I still think he's a really good coach. I think he's one of the better coaches in college basketball. I just don't know if it's working right now. And, let me take that back. I think this is the time where he's got to prove that it's working, because, Oregon, as you see with the success that they're having on the football field, like this is too good of a program right now to have 2 basketball teams that are consistently missing the tournament.
Well, let me ask you on that, because he seemed, I can't remember if it was 2 years ago or 3. It's somewhere in that range, I want to say, and maybe it was last year, and my brain's just muddled with all kinds of things right now. He seems curmudgeon-y to this world of college hoops, right? He bend the knees, he's fundamentals. I want to teach fundamentals. Like, if you gave him the option with the same amount, I almost wonder if he's in the back of his brain, like, hey, yeah, Creighton sounds great. I get 4-year guys. I don't have the one and done has been interesting. He gets these one and dones, and either they get injured early or they don't really play all that much. Like, you think of a couple names that have gone through there lately. Maybe I'm misreading it, not paying enough attention. If I am, I'm sorry, but he feels a little curmudgeon-y about this world of college basketball, and I actually don't blame him for it, but he does seem a little grumpy about the way this sport is evolving in a similar way to the football as well.
Well, yeah, because that's kind of been the big story in football right now, is the kind of the old guard of football coaches are retiring because they just don't want to kind of deal with this new era of football. And I do think that there's probably, Altman's in the old guard of basketball coaches, but I also think that he's one of the more competitive guys that I've ever met. And I also think that he cares about his ultimate legacy. Like, mm-hmm. he's not going to talk about that, but, sniffing the Final Four back in 2017 and being, on the same podiums consistently as Mike Krzyzewski and Roy Williams and all those guys, like, if he were to have ever gotten back to that point or to, sustain that success, he's putting together a Hall of Fame career. And so I think that he's kind of caught in between these two things of, like, he's not exactly enjoying the ride right now, but also I think he really doesn't want to be done. And the one thing that's been interesting this year, and I will say, talking to, people around the team and some players, like, he has been noticeably, more upbeat and positive to the players this year. I was talking to Jason Kalista about that, and he was like, well, that's just the player, 10 years later from when I played. You have to kind of be nicer and more upbeat and coddle them a little bit more. That might have just been an old head kind of trying to sound like he was tough back in the day. But, that was also earlier in the season before the Ducks lost, a handful of games. So, we'll see how it is. But yeah, I just think that this is a really important stretch coming up for them, because, if Altman can pull off another miracle and show that he's game for this, I think that he has a bunch of years left at Oregon. But at the same time, like, they're kind of coming up at an injuncture here, and they need to start putting proof down on the court.
Yeah, we'll have to get an update on that. You lose a couple games in the regular season, the conference season. I don't know if you're feeling as supportive or happy as you once were when you were thriving in the non-conference. We look forward to the reporting. Dude, great stuff. I've been a member for a long time. You're killing it. i5corridor.com, i-5corridor.com. Good article on the Hello to Michigan. I like how you end it there with the, you remember this moment? Get ready for it, because it's going to bring back some animosity. Tyson Alger on Twitter, at Tyson Alger. Give him a follow. Sign up for the website. Thanks so much for joining us, Tyson. It's good to have you back on, and we look forward to the great work.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you.
All right, there we go. Tyson Alger. Slow starting interview. I thought Swag had abandoned me. I thought he hadn't even gotten back and made a phone call.
No, sorry. For some reason, the volume didn't kick up when I slid the slider up. So
you slid the slider.
Yeah.
But we got it figured out. Good stuff from him. Let's talk about a couple things he noted there next, but first, Swag with a sports update.
This is a Super Week edition of Dirt and Sprague.
Brought to you by George McCoy at WarrenAllen.com.
Now, From the Spirit Mountain Casino Sports Desk, a Sports Center update on 1080 The Fan.
Brought to you by Laurelhurst Market Steakhouse and Butcher Shop. Their butchers are all trained chefs, eager to help with cooking advice. Get to know your friendly neighborhood butcher online at laurelhurstmarket.com. First on The Fan, Trailblazers come away from the Mile High City empty-handed, losing Sunday 112-103. Nikola Jokic. Well, he didn't have a triple-double, but was close. 29 points, 8 boards, and 7 assists. Portland now back home to start a 7-game homestand Thursday against the Pistons. Chiefs and 49ers have arrived in Las Vegas. They begin their final preparations for Super Bowl 58 this Sunday. A little distraction for Kansas City quarterback Patrick Mahomes. His father arrested once again under suspicion of driving while intoxicated in his hometown of Tyler, Texas. Washington Commanders trying to fill up their coaching staff quickly after bringing in Dan Quinn as head coach. It appears Cliff Kingsbury will be the offensive coordinator. Joe Witt Jr. coming over with Quinn from Dallas to serve as defensive coordinator. College hoops tonight on 910 ESPN Portland. 8th-ranked Kansas Jayhawks going to Manhattan to face the Wildcats of Kansas State. 6 o'clock tip. Pre-game coverage at 5:45. More sports scores and stories in 30 minutes. Jason Swigart from the Spirit Mountain Casino Sports Desk. Pro football playoffs are here. Watch and wager on every game at Spirit Mountain Casino. Visit spiritmountain.com.
You're invited to play in the first annual Fan Winter Golf. Sprague.
Brought to you by George McCoy at WarrenAllen.com.
On 1080 The Fan.
All right, good stuff from Tyson Alter. I thought he summed it up really well, Swag. He, and asking him, what have you made of all of this realignment stuff as it gets noisy again with the report that the Big Ten and the SEC are merging to form an advisory council to examine the last couple years and going forward the future of the college football playoff. There's a report that Tony Petitti wants this to go to 16 teams. I believe the Big Ten has 16 teams, correct? And the SEC has 18? Or is it flipped?
It's 18 in the Big Ten.
And then 16 in the SEC. So he is advocating to expand from 12 to 16. The report I saw said that seems like it's pretty logical and probably the way this is going. And then the holdup is you have Kirk Schultz of Washington State, who's representing the Pac-2 with Oregon State, saying, not so fast. We want guarantees of voting and revenue rights. And, of course, to no shocking development, the other people don't feel the same way. This is just a big jumbled mess, and it's ugly.
Yeah.
And whether you're a fan of Washington, Oregon, or Washington State, I think we can all agree, as Tyson said, it just sucks. It sucks. It's not. It's moving more. It's moving even more corporate, and to a point where I think my take a couple years ago is going to end up being right, where it just becomes a Big Ten SEC thing. It's like, hey, we got all the good teams. We're just going to do our own thing.
It could be. We'll see. The only thing there, if you start leaving out specific and large regions of the country,
what region of the country with the Big Ten and SEC would you be leaving out at this point? They have the East Coast, the Midwest, they have the South, and they've got the West Coast now. They've got them all covered. Now, pockets of people. Washington State fans, Oregon State fans.
Only have, what do you have? You only have 2 Texas teams in there.
All 8 Cal fans, the 4 Stanford fans that are real. Like, that is it. If you're generally just a college football fan and you love big-time college football, or you're a fan of these programs and these conferences, you're still going to clean up pretty well with the numbers.
Yeah. I don't know if you can exclude, like you are flat out excluding a large number of other teams.
Oh, who are you excluding? Run them down. Clemson? Are you talking about Miami's? Are you talking about Florida? Who are you talking about?
Well, if you go from, there are 100 and some odd,
right, but we don't care about most of those. So, like, what 4 or 5 teams are you talking about? Because if Florida State gets their way, Miami, Clemson, North Carolina, they're all going to be able to legally break away if they get their way.
Utah's
in the Big 12.
Are they in?
Well, yeah, they're in the Big 12.
Well, I understand, but they're.
Are you talking about they're in? I don't know.
If it's just the SEC and the Big Ten.
Do you trust that those 2 entities are going to have the best interests of everybody when they work together? Because I don't.
So the only thing will be, because they got to sign they're still negotiating the next TV deal, which is why we're having this goofy 2 years of.
It's a weird 2-year period.
Expanded playoffs, but then the Pac-12 fell apart, and the way that the voting is set up. So when the new TV deal and the new extension of the college football playoff until it's named something else, then the SEC and the Big Ten can get things the way that they want in there. But they got to convince their TV partners that by excluding all of these other teams, that it's still worthwhile to them. That's who they got to sell. They don't have to sell the public. They got to sell the TV execs that they'll still be as many millions of people tuning in for it, knowing that you're starting the field with 36 teams.
Well, the 3 conferences might merge together too, in the Pac-2, the Big 12, and the ACC. Again, I don't know if the Pac-12 will be included in that. Maybe they won't be. It's an optimistic view for sure. But the ACC, the Big 12, I think you examine the landscape, you kind of say, hey, they're working together. Why don't we work together? And the fact that the Big Ten and the SEC specifically are only working together, that leaves me worrisome. Now, I asked last night, do you trust they'll make it better or worse? I guess that depends on the perspective. I think the general health of college football, we love watching it. We're all in. It's getting huge eyeballs. But when you keep changing everything and the landscape evolves from regions don't matter anymore, pageantry of this stuff doesn't matter. It's corporatized, bastardized version of mini NFL, 16-team playoff, here we go, 8 from this, 8 from that. You get away from your identity. I think it's a dangerous game you play, and I think you're already in that territory. But I think you just make it even more dangerous. So we'll see, man. Jesse Simonton and Tyson Alger both kind of echoing similar things of it's messy and it's ugly, and we have no real feel if it's going to get better. But those two conferences, it gets better if you're a fan of teams in those conferences. I don't know if it gets better for the health of the sport. We'll wrap it up. Coming up next, Dirt and Sprague on The Fan.
Play golf where it's always
baby and she lives next door.
This is a Super Week edition of Dirt and Sprague.
Brought to you by George McCoy at WarrenAllen.com.
On 1080 The Fan.
I thought it was a great moment last night. I watched the Grammys, and my 12-year-old quite enjoyed the performances. She likes live music. And the one that stuck out for all of us, Tracy Chapman with Luke Combs performing Fast Car.
Wow.
And that song is now #1 all over the place.
Good grief.
So Tracy Chapman back at the...
missed it entirely.
You missed the entire award show.
My youngest nephew, who plays basketball, had a middle school tournament out in Hillsborough, very close.
On a Sunday night. That makes sense.
Sunday afternoon. So it was Saturday, Sunday.
Oh, okay.
So the last game got over at like 6. And so then I came back. I needed to cook some food for the actress for the week since I'm leaving, and she's starting rehearsals now on her next performance.
You're meal prepping.
So I was doing that. I still had production work to do for the station. I flipped on the end of the Blazer game, and so by that time, it's like, okay, whatever. Completely don't even know who won anything. Don't even know about nothing.
Well, Tracy Chapman's performance, Luke Combs, was pretty good.
Okay.
You also had Taylor Swift piss people off again. She won Artist of the Year, her 4th. That's the most in Grammy history. No other artist has won 4. Album of the Year, I believe, is the...
Album of the Year?
I believe she won Album of the Year for the 4th time. So that upsets people because it's Taylor Swift. So let's get upset about Taylor Swift. But overall, good night. Good night of music. The Blazer game was going on as well. And so I thought that was a nice story for Tracy Chapman. She looks like she really appreciated and had fun out on the Grammy stage. We also, I didn't get to it today. Maybe we talk about it tomorrow. Swag.
What?
We got a Belichick in Seattle.
What's he going to do? Be the DC?
Oh, have you not seen this?
No.
Oh. Yeah, no, not Bill.
Oh.
Steve. His son. I think it's Steve Belichick. He got hired. Jed Fish hired him as the DC.
Wow.
Yeah. He's a lick the air DC, too. He's like a Wilcox. You know what I mean? Like, what's going on? It's intense. We got a Belichick in Seattle with Jed Fish. And we got more of the Super Bowl this week to get to, Swigard. Not a whole lot going on. Maybe if you're an NHL, NBA fan, you got some games that are on as options.
Tomorrow night. Well, I'll touch it on tomorrow. Huge game in the NHL.
You're going to touch it tomorrow?
Yeah.
I can't wait for you to touch it. That's going to do it for us. We have 4 interviews to go back and check out.
Yes.
Jesse Simonton, Michael Lombardi, Sean Highkin, Tyson Alger.
I've been a podcasting fiend here this morning.
I've given you a lot of work today.
It's almost all up.
We have a lot more to get into throughout the week. We'll keep diving in more and more to the Super Bowl, dive into some more college football dealings, some NBA stuff as well. It is going to be a busy week here. Thanks for hanging out with us on the YouTube stream, chiming in at the Vancouver Ford text line, and we'll talk to you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Dirt and Sprague. We'll catch you 6 to 9 a.m. on Portland's Sports Leader, 1080 The Van.
I'm Michael Jenkins. Something you beat the most night to well. And just picked up a huge win over the weekend, knocking off number 4 Houston on Saturday. But tonight they face in-state rival Kansas State. The Cats are in a tailspin, having lost 4 straight.